good morning, good afternoon, and I would say probably good night for a couple of you. Thank you very much for joining us. While others keep on connecting, I think it's fair that we start with the already very good number we have with us here. And you joined us on time, so we have to start almost on time. And hopefully we will ensure that the meeting will not exceed too much of the 2 hours. Cosima will be very keen about that. And let us move now to some housekeeping issues in order to see how we'll be working. The meeting will be recorded because we need to prepare a report afterward that will be shared with you. I hope you have no objection for that. Please keep your mic mute unless you speak. Otherwise, keep it mute all time in order to avoid interference. And also, when you see difficulties in connecting, you can also close your video. But when you will speak, if possible, please keep your video open. If you have any questions, when we will come to that, you have the chat directly, but you can raise hand. Also, it's feasible. And there will be a lot of references on the website for the document. We will be preparing throughout the meeting some brief quotes from the speakers on Twitter and Facebook. And one point, Cosima prepared a bell for the presenters, just to tell them, please, we need you to close, and we don't want to exceed much of the time. This is the purpose of the meeting. Of course, you have seen all of you, and maybe questions. We're talking about internal meetings. It's basically bringing together all the components of the Switch program to discuss opportunities for collaboration on thematic issues, and namely on plastic today, so that we have the cross-border exchange and experience and have a larger impact, and then look for opportunities for synergies and partnership with you. But please let us keep in mind, and that's why the purpose we call it internal, it is just a first step of the work that we are doing. We want to deep dive, to go further, to extend the discussion on those very important topics. Plastics here, yesterday or the months before, we did it on housing, on textile, on procurement, on agri-food. And we need to make sure that we have a larger number of stakeholders well aware about this, the opportunities, the challenges around this topic, make sure that we do have a regional understanding about the topic, and then make sure also that the EU takes the right concerns from Asia in their next programming exercise. So it is not just one-shot meeting, it's just one step before we have larger meetings that will be of interest to each and every one of you. Okay, now the agenda, I will be very brief. You have received it. It's basically composed of three elements. The opening with few experts with us. You will hear the presentations from the technical assistance expert that we have, hopefully representative from the countries, because the EU Switch Asia program supports a lot of the countries in advancing SCP and different topics, and also to some of our grant projects who are effectively working on the topic. And then we will have at the end a very important panel meeting that will be moderated by my colleague Cosima, that will be coordinated and will hear by Cosima with a set of questions where people will be replying. Okay, this is the discussion. The question have been raised with them, and I'm sure that will be very interactive and extremely interesting one. Okay, now allow me just very brief opening remarks, which basically I want to recall some, I will call them some facts. You all know about them, but it's important to keep them in mind. We are basically, our world now is concentrated around consumers who are the most wasteful part of the society. And our consumption patterns are really driving the global and local material use. And even though we have many approaches, policies, behavior change in some places, we remain make, use, dispose economies mostly, and this has a major impact on the plastics. And being in Asia, when we look at the growing middle class, the growing middle class consumers who will have an increasing demand for consumption, which means more material, more disposal, more plastic, we can only be concerned. And unfortunately, the recent or the current COVID situation, COVID has just brought us back several years backward, and we need to draw the lessons in order in the recovery process, the green recovery, not make the same mistakes. So there will be increasing need for plastic, and we have to be aware of the way we approach the plastic issue. There is, I would say sometimes even excessive focus on marine litter and single-use plastic, which are end of the pipe, that the things that we see. But we seem to forget the invisible part of the iceberg, where we need to make the changes, where we need to be more resource efficient in order to effectively tackle in the long term the plastic issue through improved information, innovation, and so on. Unfortunately, plastic issue has been much more a PR issue, even by the high-level political people. I don't want to name them here. The media has taken it. It's very nice to communicate about it. You read about it, but it does not necessarily drive a change. So the need for efficiency, the need for innovation at local level, national level, regional level, with all stakeholders, including the private sector, is absolutely necessary. But this is also a sector where the government needs to lead by example. Of course, it's important to have a policy. We can have a law, we can have a legislation about it, but if we have not prepared the market, if we have not duly informed the consumers, if we have not found incentives for the private sector, we can have a nice policy, a nice law, but then we keep on business as usual, targeting one element of the plastic and not the whole system of the plastic. And so we have to be very careful on how you will be handling. Solutions, there are plenty, and you will have few examples today that will be presented to you. But those solutions, as today, because of the market situation, the policy situation, are not really scalable. And that's what we need to think about, how to make sure that what is being done at a small level can be replicated, can be scaled up in order to effectively have a good impact. So plastic is the right issue where we need to talk about behavioral change. But you know, behavioral change does not occur by law. It does not occur with a stick. It needs incentives, it needs carrot, but it needs mostly a mindset change that require the proper information and the enabling of the people. So I will end up by here. What is the problem at the end of the day? Is plastic per se a problem? No, because we do have good plastic. Plastic has been a revolution for our economies. How can we do health issues now without plastic all around? How can we do on construction without plastic? But as we say, there is plastic and plastic. There is the bad plastic that we see going in the sea, that we see going affecting the turtles, that we are throwing away. We need to make sure that we get rid of it and manage it better. There is the agri plastic, the one that we can reshape, improve, do it in a way that it becomes something not so harmful through innovation, efficiency, and so on. And there are the good plastics. So let us be careful about plastic between the bad, the ugly, and the good ones when we're looking at the policies, and not to just focus on one item without looking at the rest. And being in Asia, this is my last word. We are in Bangkok, and we see in the street, go in Hanoi, go in Jakarta, it's the same. Plastic is not just everywhere thrown away, but plastic is a necessary element of the day-to-day life for the food in the street food. So this has to be kept in mind properly. What type of alternatives are we bringing to that? With this brief introduction, let me share with you a video that we prepared, just a 3-minute video on plastics before giving the floor to Mr. Luca Malmo. Can we have the video, please?
Did you ever wonder about the consequences of your consumption habits? The more you have, the happier you will be, is the message we are constantly told. However, our current unsustainable make, use, waste model is causing a severe impact on both people and the environment. The recent economic growth in Asia has lifted many countries out of poverty, but it has also created a large number of new consumers, with plastics having made their way to nearly every aspect of our lives. Global plastic use has increased 20 times as much in the past 50 years and is expected to double in the next 20 years. Worldwide, we are already producing about 300 million tons of plastic waste every year. Even if citizens in developed economies are using about 20 times more plastics per person than in Asian developing countries, in Asia, plastics have become a major concern, threatening the safety and quality of our health and food, negatively impacting our ecosystems and contributing to climate change. It is time to change. We should do our best to eliminate the use of plastics, especially single-use plastics. In a new circular economy, plastics waste can be used to produce new goods. In this way, we limit the quantity of plastics that is being generated. Governments should take strong action, promoting higher standards and innovative and available alternatives to plastics. Businesses must innovate and design plastics that can be safely reused, recycled, remanufactured, or composted. Consumers must circulate all the plastic items they use and keep them in the economy and out of the environment. The European Commission launched in 2018 its European Strategy for Plastics in a Circular Economy, a directive on single-use plastics in 2019, and its new Circular Economy Action Plan in 2020 as part of its commitments within the EU Green Deal. The EU is also supporting the participation of its partner countries around the world to the Global Agreement on Plastics. Waste and plastics are two building blocks to push forward the transition towards a green economy. Since 2007, the Switch Asia program has implemented several grant projects promoting responsible supply chains and business practices, contributing to waste management and plastics in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. The program is also providing policy support to Pakistan and Maldives on waste and plastics management, and to Lao PDR on minimizing, reducing, and preventing single-use plastics. These issues are universal, and they touch every person on the planet. Play your part. Rethink, reduce, reuse, recycle. Each one of us can make a difference. It is our common and shared responsibility.
Thank you very much. Maya, can we go to next one? Just please, colleagues, note that this video is yours. So if you need to use it, to share it, to upload it in your meetings, please go ahead with that. This video is yours. And if we are gathered here today, it is thanks to the fantastic support that the Switch Asia program has got from the EU for the last 14 years. With this support that goes to countries, to governments, to grant projects, to small and medium enterprises throughout Asia, working on different topics. Thanks to the EU headquarters, thanks to Alessandra Lepore, who's the project manager there on that. Thanks to all the EU delegation in the countries, many of them are present, with whom we are working very closely on local implementation. And without any further ado, let me call in here Mr. Luca Malmo, the senior expert, DG Environment, European Commission, who joined the European Commission in '97 and has since worked on a variety of policy and legislative files on its Environment Directorate General, including organic waste management, soil protection, and bilateral relations between the EU, India, Indonesia, and Southeast Asia. And since 2016, Luca has been working on the international aspect of sustainable consumption and production, resource efficiency and circularity. Luca, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all colleagues. So I would like to present what is being done to address plastic challenges and seize opportunities in the context of our work. So in terms of challenges, some have already been mentioned. The issue of what to do with plastic waste, most of it at the moment is going to landfill or is being littered. So the challenge is to change this aspect, because plastic waste, plastic litter ends up in the environment in general, and in particular in our seas and oceans, where affects wildlife, where affects also tourism, where affect fisheries, could have risk for human health, so all sorts of problems. In terms of the European experience, a good part of the marine litter is composed of single-use plastic products and fishing gear, and I'll give you some figures in a moment. So that's a particular area of concern where we have focused our attention. This gives you just a snapshot of all the seabed litter linked with the fishing gear around the European coasts, but the situation elsewhere probably is not that different. According to evaluations done in past years, which are models and estimates, so should not be taken like the gospel, but the assessment is that the 10 rivers in the globe are the ones who are carrying the plastic litter from inland to seas and oceans. And most of these 10 rivers are in the Asia region, which seems to be a particular hotspot for this marine litter, but Europe is not exempt. We may not have one of the 10 major rivers, but still we do find a lot of litter on our beaches. So that for the challenges. In terms of opportunities, there are opportunities in terms of cost savings by making plastic products, design plastic products in a more, let's say, intelligent way. So economic reasons, and we need to push and support developments in this direction. Addressing bad plastic is also a way of contributing to the fight against climate change, because plastic is made of oil. So when we have these entering the environment and eventually degrading, that is carbon dioxide that contributes to climate change. So options to avoid bad plastic and to recycle, where reuse first and then recycle what is not reusable or avoidable, contributes to climate change. So economic reasons, environmental reasons as opportunities. There is also the aspect of potential risks to the food chain, and here I put two opinions of the European Commission's group of chief scientific advisors, the one on the left from 2018, the one on the right for 2019, where they have focused on microplastics. So once big chunks of plastic enter the seas, physical action, chemical action, the sun, and so on, causes the fragmentation of these plastic pieces, making them very small. Micro or even nano plastics are therefore generated, and these are then ingested by fish and eventually go along the food chain, ending up also on our plates. So the issue of microplastic, which these days is found everywhere, including in mineral water, so is not yet a proven health hazard, but the risk is there. Therefore, we have to be careful. So by addressing the plastic, the bad plastic, and mismanaged plastic, we also contribute to, I said, economy, environment, and also human and animal health issues. So we want to go from a linear economy. This is the general European approach that you well know, from a linear economy where everything is ends up as waste, in a circular one where we close the loop as much as we can, and we keep the resources into the economic cycle. So what has the EU been doing? One of the first initiatives was the adoption by the Commission in 2018 of the EU plastic strategy to address all these different aspects, including the global dimension, but in particular with a focus on upstream actions. So what can we do to avoid that, for example, single-use plastic items litter our beaches and are such a waste of resources of something that is used just for a few minutes or a few seconds. So some targets in terms of packaging made of plastic that should be reusable or recyclable by 2030. There are design rules, because 80% of the impacts of products in general, not only plastic products, but products in general, can be avoided in the design phase. So how we can improve the way in which we produce our plastic products. And a number of other things on which I will say a few words in a moment. So I mentioned before single-use plastic and fishing gear found in European beaches. So on the left, you have what is marine litter, the composition of the litter found on beaches. So single-use plastic, it's half of the total. Another good, almost a third is, or a bit more than a quarter, is fishing related plastic items. So it means that by tackling the 10 most find out single-use items found on European beaches, and by tackling fishing gear, we get to basically, we cover 70% of the marine litter problem. So that is what we've done through a directive on single-use plastic and fishing gear. And this is an important aspect, I think, for working with our partner countries in Asia and elsewhere, but particularly in Asia. So the directive has a kind of differentiated approach. For certain single-use plastic items, the one on the left, plastic cutleries, plates, straws, and so on, we have made a ban. So those kind of materials will not have to be produced by plastic anymore. So a ban of single-use, certain single-use plastic products. For certain other types of plastic products, single-use plastic products, food containers and cups, there is targets in terms of reducing the consumption of these items. The third action is around extended producer, design measures. So design measures, in particular for PET bottles and for the caps, so that we reduce the amount of plastic, we increase the use, so we have a pull factor in terms of recycling waste plastic. And there is also a design component for the caps so that they are not easily taken away from the bottle, and therefore easier to collect, and we avoid the littering aspects. So 3 different measures depending on the type of plastic items. There are also, for other single-use plastic products, like wet wipes, like the cigarette filters and so on, an obligation to indicate on the packaging that these materials contain plastics, and that therefore should not be disposed, should not be thrown into the environment, because they are problematic for the environment. Finally, and very important, I think, is the use of market-based instruments, in particular extended producer responsibility, which is something that in the European Union we have been doing since a number of years. But in particular for single-use plastic and fishing gear, there is a lot of emphasis on plastic producers to take care of the costs of waste management, of increasing awareness in the public about the problem, data gathering, cleanup actions. So all these aspects are part of extended producer responsibility, again, with a differentiation depending on the type of single-use plastic products we are considering. So we believe that this panoply of instruments, from banning, from design aspects, from differentiation in terms of the rules applicable, in terms of market-based instrument, could and should also be used in third countries, in particular in Asian countries. So the help of Switch projects in supporting this kind of policy and regulatory development will also be very important. This also applies to fishing gear, which I said is about a quarter, at least in the European experience, of the kind of marine litter we find. So also fishing gear, which has apart from the issue of the microplastics, also the entanglement of marine life. So also on fishing gear, there is action at European level to have extended producer responsibility, to control the way in which the fishing gear is put on the market and then collected in terms of standardization, marking, and so on. Waste aspects also very important in terms of the waste management, but also in terms of preventing the waste arising. So we have targets in our packaging and packaging waste directive, so in the legislation on packaging, about recycling targets, which, as you see, are fairly high. We want to increase the amount of plastic packaging that is recycled as a way of avoiding that all these plastics end up in the environment or is wasted resources. And to do that, there is also, is not a legislative obligation, but there is an aim, a quantified objective in the plastic strategy, that is to have 10 million tons of recycled plastics used in new products put on the EU market by 2025. This is something that that the Commission has been doing cooperation with plastic producer, with the whole plastic value chain. There is a Circular Plastic Alliance. So I think this is also an example of the fact that the EU works not only on the regulatory level, but also works with businesses. And we have engaged with them in order to make this aim a reality through the help also of plastic producers and the whole plastic value chain. A lot of things also happening in terms of microplastics. I think you know that the fragmentation I was talking before is what is called unintentional microplastics generation. There is also intentional microplastic that is added to certain types of products like cosmetics, like paints. So, and the two, whether intentionally added or whether unintentionally coming from wear and tear, are two different strands of works on which we are acting, including particularly for what concerns the microplastics intentionally added, so the one that can be designed out. There is action in the context of the REACH regulation, so our chemical legislation, to avoid and prevent the use of or the addition, sorry, of certain microplastic to certain products. This is an ongoing work that I think should see a first step towards the end of this year, when there will be a proposal from the Commission to EU member states to amend certain requirements in the REACH regulation to achieve that objective. But we are also working on, for example, microplastic generated from wear and tear of tires. So also on the unintentional, to see what can be done to address that problem. Legislation, so legislation on plastic, legislation on waste. We also have legislation in terms of the environmental status of the marine environment, with the specific criteria for the determination of good environmental status of European waters, also in terms of marine litter. There are thresholds that have been adopted, so you will have some further information by clicking on those links when the presentation will be circulated. I think 2 or 3 more things. The Port Reception Facility Directive. So this is also legislation which could be supported, the development of which could be supported also in coastal Asian countries, that is to favor the fact that when fishermen go out to sea and collect any types of marine litter and come across any type of marine litter, they take it on board and then they bring it ashore to port, and there they leave it in order that it is treated, as opposed to leaving it hanging out in the high seas. So a way of enrolling the help of fishermen in this kind of operation. Of course, you need facilities in the port that would be collecting that waste, and you also need a way of ensuring that is as hassle-free and as cost-free as possible for the fishermen to do this kind of operation. Finally, this is something we are doing right now, is putting in place at the global level an agreement to tackle plastics. If we don't do anything, plastic arising in our ocean and seas will triple by 2040. It's an issue that doesn't know borders because the pollution is transboundary, and also the creation of the problem is transboundary. We all use plastics in every country in the world. So the EU position is that we need to fill current governance gaps, building on existing instruments. And our objective is that by the time the next United Nations Environment Assembly, so UNEA, meets in February 2022, so that at that meeting, the global community decides to start negotiations by establishing an intergovernmental negotiating committee on a new global plastic agreement that would tackle in particular the upstream phase. So the aspects linked to design, the aspects linked to a more efficient use of the plastic resource, aspect linked to circularity, and so on, because the downstream dimension, the waste aspects, are already partially covered through, for example, the requirements under the Basel Convention on the transboundary shipment of waste. So this is a particular political aim of the European Union and the EU member states that we have set in the Circular Economy Action Plan, and on which we are working right now. So when you develop projects, when you approach national authorities in the target countries of the Switch Asia program, please do bear in mind this political aim of the EU when you interact with the national authorities. More than 100 countries in the UN are supporting this development, this idea of work towards the development of a new global plastic agreement. And certainly we need to keep this momentum and have a successful outcome in terms of launching the negotiations next February. With this, I think I conclude. I thank you for your attention. Thanks.
Malmo, Luca, thank you. Thank you very much for this extensive presentation demonstrating how much the EU is committed to tackle this plastic issue, and also to do it with other partners through the possibility of this global agreement that hopefully will be prepared and signed on at next UNEA. Wish you all the best. Hopefully this will be followed also by enabling capacity to different governments to effectively implement them at a later stage. Please stay with us a few minutes because we want to have now Mr. Magnus Bankston, and then after that we will take a screenshot of pictures of the people attending. So Magnus Bankston is an international sustainability expert advising government and organization on policies related to consumption and production and circular economy. He has lived and worked in Asia for close to 20 years, so he's very, very familiar with the local situation and special work and attention to the ASEAN. He's currently assisting in the establishment of an ASEAN platform for circular economy, while also facilitating the EU-Indonesia cooperation on circular economy and supporting government of Laos with Switch Asia on policies to address single-use plastic. Magnus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arab, and very good good morning or afternoon to all of you. So thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. It's a great opportunity to share some observations with all of you on how I see the major challenges and opportunities to take action on plastics in the Asian region. Some of what I will be talking about draws from a gap analysis study that I was co-leading a couple of years ago, where we looked at all the ASEAN member states. This was supported by the E-Ready instrument, this dialogue instrument between EU and ASEAN, and we worked closely with the ASEAN Secretariat Environment Division, looking at how these countries are addressing plastics issues from a circular economy perspective, mainly at what governments are doing, but also taking into consideration actions taken by various stakeholders. And we had the opportunity to work relatively comprehensively. In addition to desktop work, we could visit most of these countries and do interviews, having a workshop to interact with government officials and receiving feedback on a draft publication. Of course, it's not only about ASEAN and this work. What I'm going to say here draws also from experiences from other projects that I've been involved in, and the wider literature and the great work done by a large number of colleagues across the ASEAN the Asian region. And I have tried to crystallize 8 common challenges and that we can also see as opportunities for improving. Of course, Asia is a huge region. It's the largest region in the world, and it's very diverse. It means that these challenges don't look the same everywhere. So I'm really painting a picture with a very broad brush here, and what I say will be truer in some places than in others. But I think there's a basis to say that plastics, to a great extent, tends to be seen as a waste issue, a waste and pollution issue, and people apply a very downstream perspective on these materials. And I will say more about that in a minute. We see it changing, I can say also, but I think this is still very much prevalent. We also see that there is quite some recycling happening already in Asia, but much of this recycling is not of a very good quality, and we see quite little action from governments to try to improve the quality of recyclables and recycling processes. There is a tendency to just regard recycling as recycling is good. As long as recycling happens, it means that these materials disappear and they don't end up in the ocean and they don't end up in the landfill. So it solves the problem for local municipalities and it protects the environment. But of course, recycling can be better or worse, and quite a lot currently results in low value materials, downcycling, used for products with very short lifetime, and doesn't really replace new plastics, which is kind of the key point of recycling. And related to this also, we find few efforts to really stimulate the demand for recycled plastics. There is an assumption, often implicit, that as long as you just send things for recycling, there will always be use for it somehow. But if you want to have a good quality circulation of plastics, you need to address the whole cycle and close the loops. And you need to make sure that there is a good demand for high quality recycles and for closed loop recycling, where these materials are coming back with the same quality as when they were new, so that they can replace new plastics and become new products again. We also see a very limited recognition and support of the informal sector, which plays a very important role in taking care of some of these materials. These people are often extremely poor and working under challenging conditions, but they are suffering from social stigma, and they are often seldom recognized by the local municipalities, and they don't receive the kind of support that they would need. There is also a lack of recognition of the need to address hazardous substances found in plastics. Many of these substances are added intentionally to give plastics various properties. We tend to see plastics as inert, hygienic materials, but there are thousands of chemicals of concern that are used in plastic materials. And currently, there is very little recognition and discussion around this in Asia. So there's a huge need for capacity building and awareness raising. There is also a limited understanding of what bioplastics really are about. Bio-based plastics, plastics that are made of biomass resources, renewable resources, and plastics that can biodegrade under various conditions. These are often talked about in very simplistic terms, and there is very little understanding of the differences between different types of bioplastics and in what context they can be good options compared to what we have today. Also, we see far too few initiatives to really stimulate design for better products. The shift to more circular economy and more sustainable systems for plastics requires a lot of innovation, a lot of new thinking, developing new business models, especially reuse systems have been proven again and again to have great advantages over single-use systems. So rather than switching from plastic to something else like paper, we should think of how we can switch to reuse systems where packaging is refilled and used again and again. There are many such initiatives around the region, but currently governments are not very active in supporting these upcoming initiatives. Final point, there is also tension in what the governments are doing here. On the one hand, they are struggling with the challenges related with lots of plastic and growing amounts of plastic, but at the same time, the plastic industry is also seen as a source of economic growth and job creation. There are in some cases subsidies and support of this industry, and this creates a tension. The governments, need to get more coherent in what they are doing. If plastic is really a challenge for our society, we also need to have that reflected in the way we address this at the very upstream where the problems start. As I said in my first point here, there is a tendency, although the situation is improving, I can say, but there is still a tendency to look at these materials from a waste management point of view. These products that come out of the economy as waste, what do we do with them? How can we collect them? How can some of them be recycled? Those are good questions to start with, but we cannot stop there because this is an end-of-pipe approach. It doesn't really change anything fundamentally. We can make certain improvements, but we will not really be able to solve the plastics issues in a satisfactory manner if we continue with this. So we need a much broader approach, a much wider way of addressing plastics, asking questions about where is plastics really needed and where can we get rid of it? How can we adopt reuse options, as I talked about before, which in most cases are environmentally beneficial compared to single-use options? How can we switch to other materials? How can we make plastic from sustainable feedstocks? And I will not continue to go through this whole list. You get the point. We need a circular economy mindset and a circular economy approach. We see often people acknowledging awareness of the need for a circular economy approach to plastic, but we don't really see that well reflected in practice yet. There is lots of work to do to really shift from the waste management approach to a truly circular economy approach. So here is where we are currently. We have a very linear plastic system. These materials are made of fossil fuels. They cause widespread pollution, not only at the end of life, it's actually across the whole value chain. They are associated with toxic hazardous substances, and there are other issues related with these materials. So we need to envisage a better future sustainable circular system for polymers in our society. Many of these, I believe, and many others with me, will be bio-based rather than fossil-based. This will all be powered by renewables. We will have phased out hazardous substances. These operations will be climate neutral. We will design products to be durable and go for reuse systems. And when recycling is possible, or when it's necessary, I should say, the products have been designed in such a way that they can be easily recycled, and that there is a business case to do that effectively. And that the recycling is done with high quality so that the materials can go back and replace new materials in a closed loop. And composting also to degrade plastics into nutrients, plant nutrients and soil-like substances certainly also has a role to play in this future sustainable system. And this is a major shift, a major transformation that needs to happen from the system we have now. And currently, no one really has the roadmap on how to navigate this complex transition. I think we need to be clear about accomplishing this will, of course, take time. It will take decades. There will be a lot of complexity. Of course, the incumbent industries that currently earn a lot of money from their linear practices, they will resist these changes in many cases. But there will also be other complexity of what is really better, what is really more sustainable. We need lots of innovation. We need lots of experiments, learning lessons. We need to be open to making mistakes and learning lessons. And we need to be open to having temporary solutions that we know are not fully sustainable, but they are at least improvements. And my final point here, when we go for such solutions that are improvements on the current situation, but not fully sustainable, we need to make sure that they are stepping stones to even more sustainable and better systems in the future. We need to be careful that we don't create lock-ins that make us get stuck in this transition, but that we can continue. If we invest lots of money in building up capacity for incineration of plastic, for example, or if we build up capacity to do relatively low quality recycling, there is a high risk that we will get stuck in this, and it will be difficult to move on towards more sustainable solutions. I think I've used up all my time here, so I would like to thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you for presenting those challenges and opportunities to better manage waste and plastic in Asia, basically in Southeast Asia, which is an extremely important region, very much criticized for the plastic going down to the sea, to the main rivers. And we took well note of the necessity for a circular economy mindset for effective transition, and the need for effective practice more than just accepting the concept. Before moving to giving the floor to my colleague Cosima Star, who have coordinated all the preparation of this cluster for all of us, has been talking with all of you, connecting with all of you on a daily basis for the last couple of months. Can I ask you all to just open your video? Please, can you, all of you, just put your video on so we have pictures. You can later on care about your hair, your perfume, your makeup, your addressing your shirt, like me trying to be a little bit more elegant and so on. So that is, and I will ask a couple of colleagues to take the screenshot, and it allows me then to see how many nice faces we have here, many colleagues with us. I'm not going to name some of them because then I will be accused of missing the others, but thank you very much. Thank you for the background that you have for some of you on the beach, at home, rethinking plastics, my colleagues from different offices. So I think we have almost all of you connected here. So we still have missed some, but I mean, we have a couple of screenshots taken. Now we can go back to business as normal. Thank you all for putting your picture. You can of course remain here with us with your video, unless the system gets heavy with that. Now Cosima. Cosima Star is our key expert on SCP for South Asia, but not only that, she's also covering all this issue of green finance for the region and for the whole program. And she has been working diligently, hardly to make this meeting on a very sensitive issue. So, Cosima, the floor is yours. Please take us up, lead us.
Yes, thank you very much, Arab. Yeah, I think now that we have had these excellent presentations, both from EU level as well as from Magnus sharing his insights from across Asia, I think it's high time that now also our Switch Asia experience is being presented, but both from both important components, of course, both the policy advisory component as well as the grants implementation work that we are doing. And I would like to refer you once more to the info note that we have shared as part of the invitation of the with the invitation to this workshop, because there you can find all the information, most recent work that has been done, both in terms of policy assignment as well as grant implementation work. And as you can see, not all of the assignments and not all of the grants have the opportunity to present today, but this is only because we didn't want the meeting to last longer than 2.5, 3 hours. Of course, all of these perspectives are very valid and are very, very important. And we look very much forward to the opportunity of having a larger scale conference where we can really then present all of the perspectives of our colleagues working so diligently with the Switch Asia SCP facility team and also as part of the Switch Asia program. And I would just like to mention the one assignment that isn't presented today. It's actually an assignment in the Maldives, where the Maldivian government is being advised on their already taken step with regards to a full single-use plastics phase out in the coming years. And also we have 3 additional projects, Prevent Plastics from Myanmar, Sustainable Plastic Recycling in Mongolia, and Protoprint in India. And I'm very glad to see that also from these teams, from these grants, we also have participants present, and yeah, look forward to hopefully their contributions then in the discussion. And now I would like to welcome the first contribution from the side of the SCP policy assignments. Next speaker, I would like to welcome Mr. Muhammad Irfan Tariq from the government of Pakistan. He's the Director General, Environment and Climate Change in the Ministry of Climate Change, and also national focal point for the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. He also acts as national focal point on SCP policy. And in Pakistan, he has been working closely with an expert team staffed both by an Australian international expert, Mr. Tom Clark, and Ms. Saima Shafiq, who has also assisted Mr. Tariq in preparing for today's event. And I'm very happy that they can both be here today. And I would like to welcome you now to the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, thank you very much for inviting us to this very important global challenge of plastics. And I'm extremely happy, extremely honored to be here with you, colleagues, sharing same vision and targets to eliminate plastic. I have with me Dr. Saima, a very important team member with us. And let me start by thanking SCP, Switch Asia, UNEP, for a very productive engagement in the plastic sector in Pakistan. And I would like to actually acknowledge the support provided by Mr. Arab. He was instrumental in engaging us with and guiding through this whole initiative, which is aimed at development of an efficient plastic waste management strategy in Pakistan. And because you see, as across the globe, Pakistan also has extreme pressure on its already overstretched natural resources, which often result in multitude of environmental challenges. Pakistan shares same vision with regard to plastics, with the global community, and we plan to share similar initiatives with the global community in eliminating this menace from our country. The purpose of this shared vision is to innovate, recycle, and create market for recycling plastic with cooperation between all key players in the value chain in the country. Ministry of Climate Change piloted sustainable consumption and production in the country, and we developed a sustainable consumption, national level sustainable consumption and production action plan, which conducted baseline assessment with the support from Switch Asia to suggest set of options to work towards plastic pollution elimination in the country. This plastic menace is a good example of an environmental externality. It is the economic cost, the economic, social, and environmental costs of plastic and compensated as transferred towards local government systems, which is the municipal system in our country. Pakistan plans to adopt the circular economy models underpinned by supported legislation and policies to operationalize the concept of effectively manage this plastic pollution. We have worked with the extended producer responsibility to reduce the burden on local governments and municipalities. Pakistan is not a key producer of plastic, but plastic import has seen a drastic increase during the recent past. It is therefore important to realize that the important importers, enterprises, and large corporations are legally bound to pay for any environmental externality. The implementation of extended producer responsibility to achieve a plastic circular economy will open avenues for the plastic industry to develop a business case in environmental conservation. Moreover, this will contribute to sustainable consumption and production by promoting resource efficiency while managing the plastic waste. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Ministry of Climate Change intends to work with the industry and partner organizations, prioritizing plastic streams, and the basic analysis of the whole initiative is to transform their supply chains by rooting out plastic materials that can be avoided, support redesign of plastic products and packaging for greater durability, reuse, and recycle. Third, legislative opportunities for industry to facilitate transition to circular economy with the aim to boost market demand for recycled products. Fourth, incorporating a grading system to provide incentives, rewards, and tax rebates to the relevant industries and entrepreneurs according to their performance. And the fifth one is feasibility and financial analysis of carrying out an extended producer responsibility scheme as a pilot. Now, this we have also worked with single-use plastic, and we have banned it in the Islamabad Capital Territory, and the analysis shows a very promising result. The Islamabad Capital Territory had shifted to alternatives, and 94% of the surveyed population were pro-ban. This is a very encouraging result. In addition, 80% of surveyed population inform increase in knowledge on plastic pollution. That was again a very encouraging outcome. After the ban, awareness raising was an integral part of the Islamabad single-use plastic ban. Similar outreach programs are being planned all across the country based on the results of the Islamabad plastic ban program. The assessment highlighted a further support for Ministry of Climate Change to formulate strategies and ensure provision of sustainable options like in the bakery sector for plant waste such as mulberry, twigs, banana, and palm leaves, which can be further explored. It also, another lesson learned was technology upgradation for the waste management sector, like provision of incinerators should be seen as one of the interventions. The third lesson learned was training in order to help them upgrade their businesses, because this is where small business entrepreneurs, they were dependent on plastic bags. The fourth intervention was soft measures, which the industry is encouraged to take voluntary actions against their generation of plastic waste. Now, all these lessons learned can be transformed into an actionable work plan, which would include a policy framework with immediate midterm and long-term actions and targets, a regulatory framework, baseline data to be collected for prioritization for plastic prevention, and based on targets and baseline data, the ministry intends to identify the relevant partners that can be involved in implementing plans for plastic waste. And accordingly, we plan to develop indicators for monitoring the progress. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these results are based on the interventions we have done. But the one major lessons learned is that the government has recognized that plastic has to be eliminated, and it cannot be done through a single measure. So it requires a number of measures. Right from the government, it requires a whole of society approach, and that is where I think the role of private sector, as said, specifically in the packaging industry, is extremely important. So what we intend doing is piloting this EPR, extended producer responsibility, in the private sector, in the packaging sector, and that is where we find a gap, and we need a model to pilot based on whatever we have learned. This is based on our practical implementation of plastic ban in Pakistan and our surveys on extended producer responsibility. And the roadmap we adopt for ourselves is to pilot it in the private sector, in the packaging industry with the model. And we look forward to hearing from other colleagues on this, and we look forward to EU Switch Asia supporting in the development of this model and piloting us with us in the packaging industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tariksa, for these very insightful comments. And it sounds like Pakistan is planning to really engage also with the private sector on this. And this was also visible in the final workshop that we had with the program end of May, where we also saw large corporations participating as stakeholders and also commenting on results presented. So that's a really encouraging trend to see coming from Pakistan. I would now like to welcome Mr. Stephen Long to the floor, who is working with the Laos assignment, of which actually also our previous presenter, Magnus Bankston, is a part. And yes, so he has been working on the Lao PDR assignment on plastics and has before worked extensively on improving waste management across the whole supply chain, and has or is currently working on a number of projects in Asia developing waste management infrastructure and services. Mr. Long, please come to the floor, and yeah, we're looking forward to your presentation. I don't see him in the list anymore, but before he was part of the list. So I would say that we just skip his presentation for now. Maybe there are technical issues, and would go to the next presenter, presenting from the experience of a grants project that was concluded 2 years ago in Luang Prabang, Laos, Ms. Tuipong Nguyen, and she is working now also as an advisor on the Sustura Laos project, which has also taken up some of the plastics work previously done with the Luang Prabang Handle with Care. And she is closely working also in the local context, of course, providing solutions to the plastic problem in Laos. So Ms. Tui, please come to the floor, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Cosima. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the organizer for having me, and I'm gonna try to share my screen now. I'm sorry that I need to have my video off because of the internet connection here is not very good. So my name is Nguyen Phương Thuy, and I'm currently an advisor at the Sustura project in Laos. Prior to this position, I was working at another Swiss Asia grant project in Luang Prabang called Luang Prabang Handle with Care, which was implemented by GIZ and several partners. So in the next 5 minutes, I will briefly present some of the work that Luang Prabang Handle with Care did on the topic of plastic reduction. Within the scope of the project, we focus on 4 areas of intervention. Promoting, the first one is promoting good environmental practices in tourism businesses. Second is promoting local handicraft and organic food in the tourism value chain. The third one is to support better management of cultural tourism activity and the dissemination of the ASEAN tourism standards. And last but not least is raising awareness and dissemination. So most of the work on plastic reduction fall on the first and the last categories. In partnership with local organizations, cooperators, hotels and fish outlets, attractions and shops, and tourists. As plastic, especially single-use plastic, have become such a big part of our modern life and business practice, it would be unrealistic and somewhat unnecessary to try to get rid of all of them. Therefore, we set a priority list. Our list includes 5 most used disposable plastic items in tourism and hospitality businesses in Laos. They are plastic bottle, plastic bag, takeaway containers, straw amenities, hotel amenities, and food condiments. So with plastic bottle, one of the activities is that we encourage businesses to offer water refill stations in their premises so that tourists can refill whatever bottle they used. And we partner with Refill My Bottle, which is a mobile application developed by a team based in Bali. We started in Luang Prabang, and after more than a year, we have listed more than 80 refill stations across the country. So as a tourist, you can basically download this app, which allows you to find the nearest refill station in several countries in Southeast Asia. We further encourage hotels to replace complementary plastic water bottles by refillable glass bottles. Some even went further and offer reusable bottles to their guests to use during their stay at the hotels. Regarding straws, we ran a no straw campaign. So participating F&B outlets would serve most of their drinks without a straw. And if any customer wants to have one, they can ask the staff. We make, in other words, we make no straw as a default. And in cafe and restaurant that stick with this campaign, they see an estimated 80% reduction in the consumption of plastic straw. We also promoted locally available materials as alternative. So we see here we have banana leaf, which has been used as a common food packaging material for a long time. Bamboo straws and bamboo waste baskets. Most hotels would line their waste bins with a plastic liner, which is changed every day. So we encourage hotels to use washable container, or some hotel would put a banana leaf as a liner in their bamboo waste bin. And one of the arguments that we use to promote this activity is costing opportunity for business. These items small, saving opportunity is significant. We ask pioneer hotels to initiative and to the wider business community in Luang Prabang and inspire them to take action. And one of the very encouraging things coming out of these activities is the increase in local in Luang Prabang. They could only cater to a small number of boutique hotels, but by the end of the project, a bigger water company started offering water in refillable glass bottle. And there's another local company produced takeaway containers made of bamboo bark, and another company offer water filter and bottling system to hotels. The project ended in April 2019. However, we were able to scale up some of its activity through another GIZ project. So we partnered with the Lao SME Service Center and a local consulting company to formalize our activities in plastic reduction and create the plastic-free Laos label. It's basically a certification scheme that incentivizes hospitality business to reduce their single-use plastic items. Yeah, so there are many challenges and lessons that we learned throughout the process. However, I would like to highlight 3 of them. The first one is when it comes to single-use plastic, our recommendations have 3 levels of interventions. The first level is elimination. So we identify what is not necessary and eliminate them, and then reduction, and finally a replacement. But we found that it's particularly hard to convince tourism business to eliminate and reduce single-use plastic. Their first reaction is to find an alternative. And we all know that not all alternatives are better. And there's a lack of information about alternative, as one of the presenters presented previously, or there are trade-offs if we look at the whole life cycle of a product. So a lot of business source to PLA, which is not necessarily a better option in Laos, because we have no PLA recycling facility here. The second lesson that we learned is that behavioral interventions are effective, low-cost, complementary solutions. For example, making eco-friendly option default, like the case of our No Straw campaign, has proven effective. We also use social norm or peer pressure to nudge businesses when they see that there are more of their peers offering glass bottle, for example, in our case, they were more likely to adopt the same practice. And last but not least, communication, but I also put policy making and implementing here. This is probably one of the most challenging things for us, it was to convince business that they have a role to play in dealing with this problem. However, most people believe that it's the government to ban plastic or to ban companies that produce plastic. While it is true that we need rules and regulation, they alone is not going to solve our problem, especially given the situation that regulation enforcement is not always effective in many countries. So it took us a lot of communication and persuasion to convince business that we all have a role to play in this battle. Yeah, that I bring much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tui. That was very, very insightful. It's too bad that we didn't get the full background on policy and also, yeah, let's say status quo on layers from Stephen, but unfortunately he hasn't rejoined. This all of what was just presented is, of course, against the background of there being no plastics recycling facilities in Laos currently, even though Laos is a net importer even of plastics waste at the moment. Also an interesting facet, of course, of the plastics challenge in Asia. I would now like to welcome to the floor Mr. Abdullah Nazir, Dr. Abdullah Nazir, who is the project leader of the Promise project, a regional Switch Asia grant project active in the Maldives, Sri Lanka and India. Previously, Mr. Dr. Nazir has acted as the Minister of State for Education, where he also worked on making Maldivian schools plastic-free, paperless, but also working on the plastics issue previously. And yeah, I'm looking very much forward to your contribution, sir.
Thank you, Katina. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. Yes, the Maldives is a very small country in South Asia, but the plastic issue in the region is very much concern for everyone. I'm glad that Switch Asia has taken the initiative of helping the region solve the plastic issue. So the Promise project is working with 3 countries in the region. So let me share my screen with you. Yes. Yes, Promise project is a consortium that includes Sri Lanka, India, Germany. Is a agent partner, and they're from the Malay and if you can see the map, you can see in Indian Ocean here the coast of Sri Lanka, India, and the entire other project. And if you go to the background, as the previous speakers said, they are during the past 30 to 40 years, the region has seen a lot of economic development that has also brought some negative impact on the climate and the marine as well. And it seems that the tourism industry becomes the major contributor to the marine business, and that has confronted the problem and the issues due to the lack of good regulations and policies in the region. And so the main aim of the Promise project is to prevent leakage of waste from land-based sources into the sea in line with the sustainable consumption and production approach. Well, yeah, these are the target activities for the region. The first thing is map out and identify sources and the consequences of marine litter. Then the project will support MSMEs and implement waste minimization options. And also we will enable access to finance for MSMEs. Then the project aims to strengthen regional policy framework for waste management. Then later, probably that this is going to be a good initiative for the region. Conceptualization initiatives of a actually zero waste alliance. Then the sensitizes wider stakeholder network about the approaches to waste prevention. Well, Maldives is a very small country, but when it comes to the waste, it's a huge problem for the country. If we look at the statistics numbers, we can see the Maldives become the most highly polluted in terms of plastic. The high prevalence of microplastic on the beaches of Maldives poses numerous health risks for both marine animals and the human beings. The prevalence of marine litter in the Maldives poses a threat to the tourism industry of the country, where the country they very much depend on the revenue from the tourism. And also the prevalence of plastic poses a great challenge to waste management in Maldives, where learning still the practiced method of waste disposal. And the government is trying very hard to bring new technologies for the waste management. Unfortunately, this issue hasn't been solved completely. And if any one of you who have visited to the Maldives, where you can see we have a separate island for waste management. Especially the one island near the Malay, Greater Malay region was placed in BBC very recently. And the question is how can national policy be engaged through the project? We intended to facilitate dialogue between policymakers and representatives from tourism industry on source-specific approaches. And we also want to conceptualize and compile and publish policy papers on marine litter prevention. And we intended to organize and moderate and evaluate roundtable discussions with stakeholders from industry, policy, and civil society. We will provide direct advice to policy makers on regional government mechanism. We are very much contact with the local government authorities and the ministries regarded. Then the second question is how can consumers be engaged through this project? We will make sure that we have a series of beach clean events that including the consumers around 3,000 participants from 3 countries will be engaged over the next 3.5 years to have a beach cleanup event. At the beginning of this year, there has very first beach cleanup event in Malay region here, Malay, where the First Lady was attended, and it was very well covered to media. Then we also intended to develop a short film to increase the consumer awareness about the plastics and its impact on both marine animals and the consumers. Conceptualize and develop the communication channels. We have already established these channels, and our website is running up, and we are using the social media channels to promote and increase the consumer awareness of the plastic. As a consumer, that the Maldives has a very ambitious plan to phase out the plastics, and very recently government has signed legislation that requires the complete ban of plastics by 2023. And 1st of June this year, several items have been already banned, like shampoo of plastic packaging below 50 ml, and the plastic bags below 30 centimeter by 30 centimeters, imported beverage in plastic packaging below 500 ml, and also plastic pots and cups. Then the safari arachnid sweetener. This is very famous among young people. That plastic wrap has been banned from June 1st, and plastic straws and the plastic stamped cotton buds also has been banned to import. From 31st December 2021, at the end of this year, the foam boxes will be banned from importing, and 1st of December 22, shampoo plastic bags, a little bit high grade, will also be banned. And by the end of 23, at the beginning of December 2023, import water plastic packaging below 1 liter also will be banned. Well, this is a short presentation to provide the PROMISE project and what we do here in the Maldives with regard to eliminating the plastics. Thank you very much for listening, and I once again thank you, Kasima and Mr. Arab, for giving this opportunity for us to share what we do here in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nazir, for your contribution. Yeah, and it's very exciting to see what will happen with the subsequent phase-out plans in Maldives. We have actually had the on specific single-use plastics as presented by Luca Malmo previously also come into force last week in the European Union. And yeah, it's a long journey. With regards to the presentation from Lao's assignment, Ara, what would you recommend us to do? Because we're already quite ahead of the time.
Yes, we understand. We've learned that Stephen is completely down in his internet. So probably if Lauren can step in for 5 minutes to just summarize what's going on in Lao, otherwise we'll move on. Lauren, can you do it?
Sure, Arab. I will just share my screen.
I will also briefly introduce you. So Lorraine Gatabaya is working with the SCP facility. She used to be a key expert, now as a senior advisor for the Southeast Asian countries. And so Lorraine has been working closely with the project team on coming forward on this important issue.
Thank you, Cosima. So I'm just going to present the technical assistance of the eSwitch Asia in Lao PDR on providing policy support on single-use plastics. And we have with us our expert Magnus Bankston, and Stephen Long couldn't connect through internet, so I will just present on their behalf. So the Switch Asia SCP facilities provide support to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Lao PDR. And our experts were tasked to develop a policy report focusing on single-use plastics and providing recommendations, including regulatory, economic information, and supportive instruments. And this has been going on since last year. And besides the work on policy options for the regulation of plastic use, the EU Switch Asia is also supporting the development of an SCP roadmap, which is being supported through the Switch Asia Regional Policy Advocacy Component. And the plastic issue will be a critical part of the SCP roadmap. So on the SCP facilities support in terms of the single-use plastic policy report, they have been developing a policy report focusing on policies for reducing single-use plastics, and they did an assessment and also provided policy options, understanding the feasibility and acceptance in the Lao context. They also did a SWOT analysis and got to interview and consult with stakeholders and also from officials from the government. And from here, they provided a scenario planning and providing the policy options that will be supporting actions such as the development of the National Plastics Action Plan. So in the policy report, they've indicated the problem statement on the issue in terms of increasing waste and diversity of plastics in Lao, and how this has contributed to the poor disposal, including dumping and burning, and having its impact on environment, economy, and society. And from there, they developed a strategy on how this single-use plastics can be eliminated, and providing solutions such as promoting alternative packaging, and also through product solutions, and also how to shift to reusable options for materials and products that can be recycled domestically. So the report is a draft right now, and once it is approved by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, it will be for publication and it will be readily accessible in the Switch Asia website. So as part of the report, they also look at the type of instruments based on the policies that the government has right now in terms of regulatory, economic, information instrument, and supportive instruments. And from here, they also look at different policy matrix over the past 10 years, and then also looked at how provided recommendations on in terms of voluntary versus mandatory, such as the National Plastic Platform, where there are different organizations from the government, from stakeholders, from the retailers, businesses. This can be a platform where the issue in plastic can be discussed, and also to know how the different partners can be involved. And as part of this, we're looking at also the sustainable consumption part, where it's important for consumers to be made aware regarding their role to address the plastic issue. And also the government, in terms of the local government and the national government, on how to improve waste management to address single-use plastic, and also to scale up alternatives. So the policy report provided this options on economic instruments and regulation as well. And also they drafted a single-use plastic action plan, which was also submitted to the ministry. And right now, there are a lot of initiatives also happening that focus on plastics. So, and we are also collaborating with the World Bank, who is also working on a project to look at plastic pollution hotspots. And we are collaborating with them, with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, towards the development of a National Plastic Action Plan. And we just had a meeting this morning, and we got the approval from the ministry us to provide additional support for the government to pursue the development of the National Plastic Action Plan in this year. So that is where we are right now, and we are going to finalize the policy assessment report and also continue in providing support to the ministry as we pursue the development of the National Plastic Action Plan. So that's it from our side.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. And I see that Stephen has just joined us right now. Stephen, I'm so sorry, Lorraine expertly took over. But if you would like, you can just briefly switch on the camera and say thank you to Lorraine.
Yeah, sorry. But where the internet completely went for half an hour just before I was about to speak. We had a small storm that's come through here. So thanks, Lorraine, for covering.
And maybe, Steve, if you have any other inputs that you want to add, as I just provided a brief overview.
Yeah, obviously, I don't know what you said because I just come in, but you know, for one of the key things that we've been working on is to try to find policies that are very specific to Lao, taking on board the Lao context, and basically policies that may work in other countries won't necessarily work here. And some of the key areas that we've been really focused on is Laos situation in terms of its place within regional supply chains, and also around enforcement, capacity around enforcement. So we have sort of looked at a lot of sort of voluntary areas initially to try to gain momentum before shifting into legislation. And another key area around that is ensuring that whatever policies we bring in place do not unduly impact the poorer parts of society. So yeah, that's a really key point here, I'd say.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And sorry about the chaos on your side. So I would like to now welcome to the floor the panelists. And first of all, I would also like to apologize for the delay. We are now way behind the time, but the contributions were just so interesting, and unfortunately my alarm tone wasn't audible, apparently. But this is fine. The main thing is I hope that all of our panelists can stay on for 25 minutes at least. In case not, please just let me know right now so that I can change the order of discussion questions. And yeah, I would also like to briefly introduce our panelists, starting with Mr. Jed Allegado, who is working as a Senior Communications Officer for Breakfree from Plastics Asia Pacific. Previously, he has worked for Oxfam as well. Then we have Mr. Alvaro Zurita joining the panel from the GIZ project, Rethinking Plastics, Circular Economy Solutions to Marine Litter, where he acts as team leader. And this is a regional project covering very different, very diverse countries in Southeast Asia, including also China. We have Ms. Soumya Chaturvedula joining us from ICLEI, where she acts as Deputy Director for the South Asia Division. And she will share with us a case example of plastics work from India. And also Mr. Feng Wang, who acts as Program Officer at the UN Environment Program for the Economics Division. Thank you very much for joining us, dear panelists. And I would now like to ask you to switch on your cameras so that we can see you. And I would like to, great, I can see Alvaro already. Yeah, maybe Alvaro, let's start right away, because yeah, as I've said for this meeting, that we have selected projects that work upstream, really on reducing the plastics problem at the source. But of course, there are also important Switch Asia grant projects, India, Mongolia, which work on plastics recycling. And your project also tackles the plastics issue from both sides, providing circular economy solutions to reduce marine litter. Could you give us some background on your project, and also which role upstream and downstream work plays as part of your project?
Sure. Thank you very much. Actually, I had prepared a presentation, but I know you're very concerned about the time. But let me share just 2 slides of my presentation. This is okay. Yes, thank you very much for this invitation to this event, to the Switch Asia meeting, the cluster brainstorming meeting. I'm very happy. Yes, we are actually implementing also an EU finance project, and it's also expected from our FPI. This is a foreign policy instrument project from our project manager, from the management, that we share our experience with the other EU projects. So it's obviously, when I was invited, we were very happy to share our experience. The Rethinking Plastics project, just 2 slides about the project, and then I can share about some experiences. This is a project financed by the EU, the Foreign Policy Instrument, and co-financed by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. The project volume is about 10 million euros, and we're implementing it together, so GIZ and Expertise France, 2 agencies implementing it together. It started already 2019, and we have almost 1 year left of implementation. We might have some additional months of extension because of COVID. We got into delay, you know, and probably this is a reality in all cooperation projects. We work with different political partners, and this is maybe important to mention that we are, okay, it's a kind of regional project, but actually we are more a multi-country project, because we have in each country, we have a political partner. We don't work, it's not an ASEAN project, or it's not a regional institution, our counterpart. It's in each country, we are basically working with the environmental ministries and the institutions that is related to the plastic or marine litter issue. We are implementing the project in Indonesia, Vietnam, China, Philippines, Thailand. These are the 5 main partner countries. And in Singapore and Japan, we have some specific activities with a reduced scope. And our areas of action are, we are basically covering the complete value chain of plastics and all topics in all countries. And this is quite challenging, quite ambitious. I would say this is an ambitious project in so many countries working on all these topics. So for EU, obviously, it's very important to have this policy dialogue. Then we are working with plastic waste management. This is what we can somehow define as downstream, and we have also our sustainable consumption production component, what we can define as our upstream activities. But when we look into the detail, sometimes it's not so easy to make the difference. You know, we work on extended producer responsibility, and this can, yeah, where can you put it? Is it a downstream measure or upstream measure? Just to finalize on our areas of action, we are also addressing the sea-based sources. The representative from the EU also talked about this, about the MARPOT convention and the fishing gears. This is also a topic we are addressing. We're addressing green procurement policies. This is basically in our work in Japan and Singapore, and awareness raising. So we are also implementing awareness raising campaigns, and this is our 6th area of action. So let me stop sharing. When you ask me about down and upstream, this is something I've learned during this project. For me, it was at the beginning, it was very clear. So downstream is waste management, and upstream is when you work at the design and product design. when you're implementing the project and when you come closer to reality, it seems not so clear. No, when we talk about extended producer waste management, extended producer responsibility, EPR, which is one of our main areas of action, what we are trying to share, we're trying to share the experience, the European experience with the partner countries. Actually, it's not only about it is waste management, but it is more than that. And we've seen in the previous presentations also that EPR can also be considered upstream measure. And originally, it was designed. The hope was when EPR was introduced, the hope was to at the end trigger a change in the product design. If it works so well as it's expected, this is another question. But in principle, EPR systems schemes can trigger a change in the product design too. So, and I see that sometimes some discussion between the upstreamers and the downstreamers, also in cooperation project, and I think sometimes it's some kind of artificial differentiation because, as I said, extended producer waste, extended producer responsibility, you can have change in the product design, but you also work on waste management, on separation. You have work on you have the informal sector, waste pickers, very basic waste management issues, and this is what I wanted to say. It's not so easy to make the difference. In the project, we are basically addressing both areas. Of, when we talk about what we consider upstream, and we are addressing the sustainable consumption production of plastics through the single-use plastics challenge. You know, single-use plastic is what we are addressing, and they were looking for modalities of reuse or single-use plastics, of replace single-use plastic by other materials. And there we have already the big challenge. What is when you try to replace by other materials, you have to have a closer look. It's not just banning something and putting anything else into place. We have basically you should start some kind of life cycle assessment to ensure that what you are doing, the material you are replacing, it's you're not the situation doesn't get worse, and you're not replacing one problem by another. Actually, I in the past I worked in the Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol was about replacing refrigerant gases by non-ozone depleting substances, and there the international community replaced just one problem by another because it was replaced by climate killers. So we have to look at it, and in that sense, in my opinion, it's also very important to look at this international agreement, which we should really look in this direction and push in this direction, that we have finally an international agreement on plastics. Only I think this is a very important issue in order to solve or to address the problem properly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alvaro. When I first had to familiarize myself with the plastics topic some years back, I was always taken aback a little bit by this notion of extended producer responsibility, as if it was something artificial to mention that producers are in fact responsible not only for the lifetime but also for the afterlife of their products. But I mean, it's a technical term and I have gotten used to it. Thank you very much for your contribution, Alvaro. Feng, I would like to ask you, taking this kind of from the national to the global, also to the global context. What role do upstream solutions and recycling need to play in solving the plastics challenge globally? And we have mentioned previously the potential plastics agreement. Where do you see those two sides come together? Or are they in fact one, as Alvaro has described?
Thank you very much for the question, Cosima. I agree actually with Alvaro's statement. I think when we speak upstream and downstream, I think they're part of the solution. They are not two separate or distinct solution. Maybe from a more abstract point of view, I think the plastic issues we are facing today, you can see the whole society is a kind of black box. The more we consume the plastics, it's like materials come into the system. And we all know that in 20 years' time, the consumption or production will double again. So the more we put in the society in the system, the more, let's say, waste will come out, because essentially the system is not circular, it's a linear. So more product coming, more waste coming out. And this means that what the downstream solution will be increasing recycling and also increasing the capture of waste, so that less waste going into the environment. And that's the downstream. What I see the upstream is really to see how can we actually make sure we find ways to reduce the consumption and the input of plastic product to the system, so that we can reduce the waste potential from the source. So that's really more at the conceptual level. I think both solutions, upstream and downstream, are both essential. But if we speak of effectiveness, if we can reduce the actual generation of plastic waste from the source, that probably will be more, let's say, more sustainable and more effective. Speaking of which, I think the overall quantity and diversity of product we put on the market is increasing at a daily basis. The key solution I would say is that if we can look into different type of materials and polymers and additives to, let's say, reduce the complexity of product to make them, let's say, more homogeneous, that will make the downstream disposal or recycling easier. Another thing is that the whole society is based on a kind of disposable culture. We use a lot of single-use packaging products. Even with COVID, we have a lot of personal protection equipment because it's needed for the sanitary and health purpose. However, I think we are turning to a kind of consumption behavior that relies a lot product materials that has a very short lifetime that will become waste immediately after use. It's the main fundamental reason why we have more and more consumption of product that's only used for a very short time. So if I have to pick one solution, I think we really need to see in many product or sectors, how can we actually improve reuse from policy point of view, and also from product design, and also from business model point of view, because we haven't seen a widespread of use of plastic packaging a product compared to other sectors like electronics that has more reuse. So I would say that reuse is very critical. It ensures us that the product materials are cycled in the society before we become waste. So it delays the waste generation. So that's what I say it's important. Another element is, I think some colleagues mentioned before in the previous presentation in the morning, that working on the chemicals of concern and also the additives and other, let's say, chemicals and also substances in product is very critical. It's the topic that's undermined and also under-investigated, because the more hazardous substances and chemicals we put in the product, it makes the system more toxic. We cannot recycle them, and it stays in the system to generate the more impact. So one of the upstream solution is also to look into those chemicals of concern and substances to trying to reduce and eliminate them from the system, so that essentially the recyclability of product will be increased as well to reduce impact. So so this is really the solution, I would say, from the technical side. Regarding your comments on a global treaty, I think it's a quite hot topic, and the latest progress is that in the next United Nations Environment Assembly to be hosted next year, member states will gather together to discuss a common agenda and also approach how countries can work together to deal with this challenge, but also to have more harmonized definition of the problem and of the polymers and products, as well as take a more aligned approach. But usually this type of process takes a long time because it needs consensus building and also agreement among member states. But I think it will also provide a momentum to raise awareness that this is a challenge that we face globally, and it needs attention and also collaboration among countries. But most importantly, we need the targets and need a vision also to work within the national territory on policy and then improve collaboration across countries. So this is the way forward, and I think it's much more positive than let's say 5 years ago to see this trend is coming. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much, Feng. Thank you also for raising the issue of additives and complex polymers and toxicity also of plastics when the production sort of allows this. Canada has actually declared plastics as such as a toxic material, given the facts known about its health impacts and also its impacts on the ecosystems. But of course, that's a simple example, and it's also not quite clear what will result from this very rigid stance with regards to policy making. You said that you were hopeful that the exponential growth of plastics in recent years and plastics waste in the past decades can be curbed. What exactly does make you hopeful in this regard?
I think that if we look at projection of different scenario, the fundamental root cause of exponential growth of plastic is that because the relatively low oil price or sometimes subsidized price for oil products, that making plastic product is relatively cheaper compared to different alternatives, for instance, cotton, paper, glass, and other materials. So economic wise, it's quite attractive to use plastic in certain application. And because it's a business, when we sell products and produce products, we look into the cost. I do think there need to be an intervention, because if you look at the externality of the impact, in some cases, as we are now speaking a lot about plastic pollution, it generates more impact in the marine environment, landfill, and others. So all the, let's say, negative effect has not been factored in and considered in this production cost of plastics. I think that's also why a lot of colleagues have mentioned extended responsibility, because that's one of the financial instruments that require producers to think upfront. If they put product on the market, what's the consequence of managing them afterwards? That's why there are also concepts like eco-modularity, to see if we design product better, can we make sure that also they pay less because they have less environment costs. Having said that, I think let's say, the positive side is that there is more and more awareness to understand that we need certain criteria, or let's say indicators, to measure the sustainability of products, not only the energy use or the environment impact, but also what are the other end of life impact a kind of product can bring. So I really hope that with different financial instrument, physical tools, from both policy and investment, there can be a kind of market creation towards more circular products, not only plastic. And we can have a more sustainable plastic product. Don't get me wrong. I think we are not against all plastic products. I think we should tackle the ones that really single-use, unnecessary, but also polluting the environment. And we also need to, let's say, create a mechanism to be able to, let's say, distinguish them from other alternatives, but also make sure we have policy tools like labels, standards, procurement, to be able to financially support a better product. So this is where I think that needs a lot of attention and support from both the government and the business to devote more to shape new markets or improved markets to cater for, let's say, more circular products. So this is where I think one of the upstream solutions, as we have been discussing, is not only the design or the product itself, but also creating the enabling environment, for instance, investment and finance, taxation, and other tools to make sure that the better product can be picked up by consumers and also can be encouraged by the the bulk users. So that's, I think, I would really also be hopeful that this is going to also change a little bit of the tide or the current trend on exponential growth of the plastic products. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Feng. That's a really nuanced answer to a quite a complex topic. I would now like to move to Sumya, representing ICLEI South Asia, because ICLEI has been actually working on local solution creation. And yeah, I would like to ask you, Sumya, in your project, how have you worked in bringing together the upstream and downstream solutions at the urban level? And also, how have stakeholders contributed to the solutions that you have developed?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Cosima. Yeah, I think I'll just shine light on the work that the cities are doing and the challenges that the cities are facing. And for those of you who don't know, ICLEI is a membership organization of local authorities globally, and we work across all the continents through 21 offices, more than 1,700 cities, local authorities, regions, on everything to do with sustainable development, and circular development is one of the pathways that we work on. So I actually modified my presentation while we were having this discussion, just to shine light on a few things which were discussed and I thought were relevant from the context, from the Indian context, which is what I'm bringing today to this meeting. So basically, from the Indian perspective, we were all, we meaning folks who are working in the plastic waste management scenario and the technical think tanks and the support to the government. We were all very hopeful in 2019 when we heard a Prime Minister say that by 2022, all of India would ban single-use plastics. That was an excellent move that was very welcome by certain sections, but of course, definitely not by the industry. And so there was a very strong reason as to why that statement was given by the Prime Minister at that point. We are just there's just a burgeoning demand for plastic, single-use plastics, and the generation of plastic waste currently standing at about 11 kilos per capita. It's going to go up in terms of consumption by about 20 to up to 20 kilos. The numbers that we see in terms of collection efficiencies, etc., official figures peg it at around 80%. But one look at the situation around, there is still improvement to be desired, and a lot of this which is collected is not recycled, but is currently in the cities and the tier 2, tier 3 towns is being dumped in municipal dumps, and any which way it is disposed. So the worst case is that it is burnt, otherwise it is disposed in unlined sanitary dump sites, landfills, etc. So the challenge is there. The challenge is only increasing. We have about 16 million tons or more of consumption annually. What's important is 43% of that is packaging and is single use in nature. And I think that is where lies the issue, and that is where lies also the opportunity to a certain extent to tackle this issue. Now, in terms of legislation, I think honestly we have it covered. Everything that we spoke about today in terms of multi-stakeholder involvement, subnational, national, local integration, identification of specific authorities, tackling labeling, tackling markings, tackling standards, the very specific roles of the different stakeholders, be it the producer, be it the consumer, be it the local authorities, the state governments, the national government, the Central Pollution Control Board, the State Pollution Control Board. So all of it is well laid out in the plastic waste management rules. They've just been amended recently this year. The standard for plastic bags, etc., has changed. They've made it more stringent. And yeah, like I said, it is multi-stakeholder at this point. These are the authorities responsible, but a lot of focus now is on the private sector, on the producers, especially from an extended producer responsibility viewpoint. So a lot of this legislation and rules are set at the national level, but all of us know that it is either the provincial level which has to actually implement the rules. They have their own set of rules. And when it comes to managing the actual waste and managing the use of plastics, local mandates, everything lies with the city authorities. It lies with the regional authority or the city authority, depending whether it's metropolitan or a small scale or a smaller city. So a lot of responsibility with the local bodies in terms of they need to provide the entire infrastructure that is required, the coordination with the state urban development, the coordination with the brand owners, the channelization of plastic waste, ensuring that the recycling industry is zoned properly. It is mandated, working with the State Pollution Control Board in terms of identifying all these different recyclers who are both in the formal and in the informal sector. So all of that is done by the local authority. The massive work that is required in terms of creating awareness is with the local authority. India has the largest informal sector. So how do you bring it into the mainstream? We were talking about materials, hazardous materials within the plastics. Some of the large areas where there is collection of plastic waste and there is informal management, treatment, processing of this plastic waste are some of the most hazardous sites in our cities. And hazardous, dangerous from an environmental standpoint, from a health and safety standpoint. So these are things that are to be regulated by the local authorities, and all the bylaws which are required for all of this comes from the local authority. So no mean responsibility, no mean feat by the local authority to kind of address all of this, while the national and the state governments make the policies and the rules. Yeah, we have complete partial bans, more than 20 states, union territories, more than 8, I think, are full bans on single-use plastics. Honest assessment is that it has met with varying, levels of success, and this is because of multiple reasons. And the main one being the accessibility and availability of good alternates. So, for example, we are seeing a lot of tapioca bags coming in. We are seeing a lot of biocompost bags coming in, but the supply in no way matches the demand. We tried to do a pilot project in one area of a city called Hyderabad. Hyderabad, just to give you the scale, is about 7.6 million people. It's considered one of the metros. So in one particular area with maybe about 100 shops, we tried to get in the tapioca bags. There was enough supply for 3 months, and after that, the supply just dried up. So while there was an entire awareness campaign which got the tourists who are coming here, it's a big tourist area, who are coming here, a lot of awareness happening with the shopkeepers, with the religious places around. Everybody agreed. The temple board was on board. Everything set, but the supply simply wasn't there. So there were a lot of supply chain issues in terms of the alternates. So these are issues that I think the state governments would need to tackle. For example, Hyderabad is in the state of Telangana. They have a T-Hub, which is an innovation center, which sits with the Indian School of Business. The Indian School of Business supports the Innovation and Incubation Center. So incentivizing these industries, zoning regulations, ensuring that they have land in areas which are in the periphery of these large cities, so that the supply chain is not impacted. Of course, COVID just threw everything else in a tizzy, but these are things in addition to the management of plastic waste, in addition to what the producers need to do. There is a there is considerable action and very important action that has to be played in terms of encouraging these kind of industries by these provincial and state governments, because you can do everything else, but if there's no supply, then it's just no-brainer at that point. So yeah, like I was saying, this is just, I think, different 7, 8 states where they banned. There is in India, there is no definition of what is a single-use plastic. Every state defines what is a single-use plastic and what is actually being banned. There is a lot of confusion because of this as well. There is a lot of pushback as well because of this. Some more stringent, some less stringent, and yeah, it creates a very confused narrative within the country. But over the years, there has been a ban, but they have tackled, for example, cutlery, straws, things like this. But what is coming out of the large supermarkets, what is coming out of the large merchandise entities, this is something that is not being tackled at all. And this is where there needs to be a concerted effort, I think, by the state governments. The local authorities do not have the wherewithal to talk to these large businesses, these international conglomerates as well. So what Amazon does in our cities, what Swiggy, the food delivery app does, what Zomato does, these are things that require at least state level, provincial level, if not at the national level, initiatives to be taken. The local authorities are just too small to be able to tackle this themselves. What this government does here is they figured out that you can do a ban of the single-use plastic only if you find an alternative which brings in convenience, which looks at functionality, which doesn't have deleterious impacts from a food, health, safety, social impact, environmental impact, economic impact. So this kind of technical analysis needs to be done, and this kind of technical analysis, usually the local authorities do not have the wherewithal to do this. So there needs to be significant technical capacity building, backstopping that is required to inform these different policies. Otherwise there is a lot of hullabaloo. There are these policies which are put out there, and then we realize it's difficult to implement them. Just to show you that the entire value chain of plastic waste extremely complex, and each one of this needs to be regulated by the local authority, which is here in the city of Hyderabad. So I think I'll stop with this last slide just to tell you what the city had done. In order to come up with an action plan, in reality, the cities do not really know what types of plastic, what types of resins, what quantities, who are the actual producers of the plastic waste. So there was an extensive exercise that was done from a quantification characterization point of view. A lot of stakeholder engagement that has happened in terms of what is possible. Private sector involvement was really strong, where there were a lot of initiatives, a lot of private sector entrepreneurs who came up and said they could support the local authority in terms of collection of specific types of plastic or resins. The Plastic Manufacturers Association, the Recycling Association, came together and said, if you can give us clean LDP, low density polyethylene, that is the largest fraction, which is the most hard to tackle. So there were solutions there from the recycling industry, which said, if you give it to us in this form, and so you have these entrepreneurs which said, we can help you collect them from the doorstep. So they are in this process of putting this ecosystem of service providers in a manner which would help the recycling industry up its intake of the waste, of what used to be once upon a time the waste plastics. There were several other strategies in terms of number one was the reduction of generation of plastic waste at source, but also improving the mechanisms of transport, collection, co-processing, and all of that. I'm not going to go into the detail, but yeah, this is what in a nutshell is being tackled here. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soumya. Yeah, this is really helpful, really insightful. From the case of India, of course, in India there are also large, plants-based for plastics manufacturing, and then also the on-processing. So of course, India is let's say a case maybe comparable to China. Whereas with many other countries in Asia where they don't have these manufacturing capacities themselves, the issue can also be tackled a bit differently. So yeah, this kind of larger stakeholder view was really very interesting. I would now like to address Jed Allegado from Break Free from Plastics with regards to the recent publication of the Plastics Atlas. So in terms of challenges that are shared in Asia or also specific to some Asian countries and not others, what are the most important facts that you have uncovered in the analysis that was carried out to make the Plastic Atlas reality?
Yeah, thank you, Cosima. So for Plastic Atlas, it's a joint publication by Break Free from Plastic Asia Pacific, which I'm part of, and Heinrich Ball Foundation Global Asia Dialogue. So we uncovered the different facets of the plastics, of single-use plastics in our lives, from plastic waste trade, which we've known how the policy of China in 2018, the ban on waste imports, how it impacted Southeast Asian countries. Yeah. And these have different interlocking issues as well, with regards to corruption, the policies of the enforcement of policies in different countries in Southeast Asia. You can see there the links of plastics to climate change, especially now with the planned petrochemical plants in Asia. I think currently the studies say that there are like 100 petrochem plants about to be constructed in the region, and of course recently also with the explosion in a petrochem plant in Thailand. Yeah, so really the link of single-use plastics to climate change, the single-use plastics and COVID-19 related waste, especially the medical waste. I've also uncovered how single-use plastics are being ingested by marine animals, how it permeates our soil, in which vegetables and fruits are being planted. The health impacts, especially with the women, they suffer a lot in terms of plastic exposure exposure to single-use plastics. And despite all these myriad of impacts and problems of single-use plastics in our lives, especially as citizens in Asia, there are pockets of hope, which we featured in the publication. The community level on-ground solutions, which are featured in the publication, zero waste, as a decentralized waste management systems. You can see here different communities in Asia, in Japan, South Korea, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and others who are really paving the way towards a zero waste future. Really trying to reduce, to properly segregate their waste, bring the recyclables to materials recovery facilities, and also at the same time compose those organic materials which can be composted. But despite their efforts, the stumbling block for them to achieve a zero waste future are single-use plastics, which can neither be recycled nor composted. Yeah. So for us, 5 main messages of Plastic Atlas Asia in order for us to tackle the plastic pollution crisis, especially in Asia. We need to reduce, we need to produce less plastic, we need to offer alternatives. Corporations which have a lot of resources should offer long-term solutions like refill and reuse systems rather than falling into trap into offering false solutions like chemical recycling, waste-to-energy incineration, plastic credit, plastic offsetting, plastic in exchange of basic goods, especially to low-income communities. These are all stopgap measures. We need to close the tap, stop petrochemical expansion. But of course, at the same time, we need to, manage the decline towards a just transition, especially for impacted workers in these industries. Yes, delivery systems, reuse and refill systems. These are already happening in some parts in Asia. We have a lot of research that we have done in terms of zero waste and plastic package-free stores. Deposit return schemes are also being piloted in Asia, but they need to be scaled. With the right policies in place, support from the government, they will really be further mainstream. We need to take into consideration a full life cycle approach to plastics, including chemicals and microplastics at the different policy levels. So banning single-use plastics, extended producers' responsibility at the national level, at the regional level, policy spaces like ASEAN, SAARC, and other regional bodies. And also at the same time, as mentioned earlier in previous presentations, we're optimistic about the UNEA discussions on a new global convention on plastic, which hopefully will pave the way towards a treaty. Yeah. So those are these are the key messages that you can see in the Plastic Atlas Asia, which we launched April this year during Earth Day. Yeah, from Heinrich Boll and Breakthrough Plastic.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chet. And just in brief, what would be the three most important messages that you would call on Asian governments to do to tackle the plastics challenge?
Yeah, definitely they need to support the global convention on plastic, ban single-use plastic, institute policies like extended producers' responsibility, manage reduce plastic production facilities and petrochemical expansion. Although, of course, from an economic point of view, economic growth point of view, these probably will help them in terms of achieving their planned growth for the country. Support policies that will enable reuse and refill systems. So we really need to manage these plastic pollution crisis, and there are definitely concrete steps which we can do as government.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Chet. And we will also link to your report on the event website, which we will update also with a report on this event and then also some further information. I would like to conclude the panel with a sort of open question to all of you, followed then by Arab's closing words. Thank you very much to everyone who stuck with us for this prolonged time, but I thought the discussion was really very interesting, and I look very much forward to continuing this discussion with you, first bilaterally and then also as part of the following higher level event on plastics, where we also have more time and will dedicate sessions to specific topics. So my question to all of you would be really what would be the key ingredients of a transformative systemic shift in plastics, and also how the Switch Asia program what the Switch Asia program can do to really reflect this topic's importance and urgency, and how to contribute from a program perspective. Varo, would you like to go first? For some reason, you popped up in my speakers.
Who should answer this question? Sorry, I didn't get it.
We can just do it alphabetically. So you would start first if you would like.
Okay, sure. Well, I think we have heard in this discussion that it's definitely necessary to somehow decouple the plastic consumption from economic growth. It's clear the challenge is how to get there, and of course we have to reduce single-use plastics. This is very clear. You see it in the statistics, in the numbers. The challenge, I mean, is when you try to introduce these kind of circular economy policies, is that our approach, we come often from the waste management, from the environmental area, and the environmental ministries are our counterparts, and normally they are not the strongest, or maybe they are the weakest ministries in a government structure. And we need to involve other ministry. We have to get to the Ministry of Economy, and the discussion has to we have to position the discussion there in the country. So this is something that is strictly necessary if we talk about circular economy. We talked about the holistic approach, life cycle assessment. I think this is clear also. I would also want to address some topic about the responsibility. So we talked about extended producer responsibilities, but this sounds very abstract. But when you look at very close to what does it mean, responsibility, it's okay, the producer, those who put the plastic on the market. But when you look at for example, convenience stores, they also have a responsibility on what is happening. Convenience stores, they have created a business model where when we go there, we buy one biscuit with one single biscuit with the individual packaging. This is not really necessary, and I don't know if this is demand driven or the convenience stores created this model. So I think we have to think a bit also about these kind of responsibilities. They have a responsibility in creating business models, and I'm just mentioning convenience store, but there are much more others. They have created business models that are not necessary because we asked for that. It's just convenient. They put it on there, and okay, then I go there. But I can perfectly go into a convenience store and buy 2 biscuits in one packaging, or 10. So this discussion has also to. We need this kind of discussion to change also consumption patterns. And regarding the Switch Asia, what can Switch Asia do? Well, I'm not so close to Switch Asia, but what coming from our Rethinking Plastics project, where we are, I missed the opportunity to talk a bit more about what we're exactly doing, but we are implementing actually 24 pilot projects on all these topics in the different partner countries. And I hope that we could make a link to our pilot project experience. Magnus mentioned it. We need practical experience in the countries. This is not Europe, this is Asia. So I hope that we could somehow find a way to continue this experience or upscaling good experiences through, for instance, the Switch Asia facility. That's from my side. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Feng, would you like to come in?
Yes, just very briefly, I think there are many solutions needed. I'm looking at the angle of Switch Asia, because Switch Asia historically has a direct link with sustainable consumption and production. I think this is a topic never gets old, and actually I think we also need to look into, if we speak about sustainable consumption, what do we mean here for the region? I think Asia is both a region for intensified consumption, let's say everyday use of plastic product, but also still a relatively big continent for producing plastic product for the global community. At the same time, also the receiving end of the plastic waste for many countries. So I think we need to look into the characteristic of the trade, and also the consumption pattern, and also production and waste handling at the regional level, to see how the program can contribute to that. So the number one point is that I still will encourage you to see, can we create certain support and tools to actually help consumers to compare the change of behavior that actually make changes and make change reduction. I mean, do they really need all the product they buy, not only plastic but also other things, lead to reduce from the source. And I still do believe, Asia still has a lot of major producers for plastic products like packaging, fishing net, and textiles, and many other sector that causing the generation of waste. So I think we need to work with the informal sector SMEs, but at the same time we also need to work with the big shots in the industry. How we can work with the big players, not forgetting the smaller ones, but to see how do we work better with the industry and also government together to reduce the production of unnecessary products. I think this is the issue. I would say sometimes it's the elephant in the room that we don't actually address them. So I think I really hope that the program can look into further areas. And another thing is always end of life and recycling. I think it's a topic not only for plastic but also for e-waste and many other waste stream. I don't think we can create a separate system for plastic only. We need to look into the integrated waste management system, how to have better segregation, better recycling, disposal. I think that's also a huge topic that we need to link with other sectors. So, but I think there's still a lot of work to do, and I think the program has made a lot of progress in the past decades. But with this new, let's say, popularity of topic, I think we have seen a new growth point as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Feng. Sumya, do you have any thoughts and insights that you would like to share with Switch Asia SCP facility and the program?
Thank you, Cosima. I think I would just reiterate what the previous two speakers just said in terms of getting the industry on board, having that multi-stakeholder dialogue with the industry. There's several things that need to be done with the industry, not just from a viewpoint of design and the production, but also from a viewpoint of how they would engage with the larger value chain and the take back systems and all of that. Especially, this is a dialogue that has simply not taken off. I can speak from the Indian perspective. That is something that is very clear, and I think there needs to be a massive change from the consumer perspective as well. Both ends is something that we will need to look at. And yeah, I think if there are programs and there are models which there need to be operational models, there need to be governance models which are put in place, and maybe this is something that Switch Asia can look at is the institutional mechanisms, the stakeholder coordination mechanisms that are embedded within official government processes. I think that would be very useful.
Thank you very much, Sumya. Jet, any final thoughts from your side on how we can take up this issue even more effectively as a program and as a facility?
Yeah, and definitely, of course, as mentioned by my co-panelists, we need to have like a really multi-stakeholder approach, multidisciplinary. So, we need to recognize that each of us and the different sectors have a role to play. So, entrepreneurs, businesses, citizens, as consumers, government, at the different levels. So, I think, yeah, for Switch Asia, might be good to look into really changing the mindset as well, I think, of these different stakeholders and how they can really support sustainable consumption and production and consumption with regards to single-use plastic. So probably helping, like incubate facilities in terms of, communities doing zero waste or enterprises that are into reuse and refill zero waste stores kind of concepts, and also enabling policy shifts that will support this kind of these transformations and changes in the society. So policy advocacy and campaigning as well in terms of civil society who can really lead the communities in calling for change and policy shifts. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to all panelists and contributors for the excellent contributions. I've learned a lot, and I've also seen that in the chat there has been a parallel discussion going on with some project ideas already being developed, also under participation of our program manager, Alessandro Leccore. So thank you very much for having the discussion that was actually planned in our regular time in the chat. And as I said, it's great that we also will have the opportunity to reconnect in bilateral and then also at a more high-level meeting where we can dedicate more time to each of these specific issues. And so, Arab, I would like to welcome you to the floor to speak the closing words for our cluster meeting. And yeah, I look forward to reconnecting with you all again.
Thank you, Cosima. Thank you all. Thank you, panel members. Thank you, all the speakers. Thank you for the ones who remained with us till the end. For all this series of what we call internal consultative meetings, we aim to have them in 2 hours, but we did not succeed for any of one. They almost all of them have been 3 hours, so even 3.5 hours. But this shows the interest of the topics that we have. We have selected the interest of the topics that are critical for Asia and for SCP from an SCP perspective. Let me come to our event here. It will be challenging to summarize everything in just a few minutes, but let me go from the beginning. When we heard that, when we look at the marine litter, single-use plastics constitute 50% of what is there. This shows that really focusing on this aspect is extremely important, but we need to know how to handle that, because it's not just an issue of banning, because we heard that not all alternatives are good. Not all alternatives are the best ones. And we have to make sure that the way we are addressing it, it engages all the stakeholders. Currently, with the COP climate coming soon, if we can highlight effectively the CO2 benefits from plastic recycling is an extremely important incentive, would it be for the private sector, the government, and the individuals in order to move there. A lot of regulations and policies are being enacted, prepared in different countries, but we all recognize that implementation is extremely challenging. And even if we are looking for a new global agreement on plastics, we all know how it will be challenging to implement all this global convention, but it will still provide a very good global framework on which we can, all of us, hook in order to see how we can move further. We have heard from the different presentations that there are several initiatives, very good examples going on locally, but we still have this problem of the market, the issue and demand, the supply, and how to involve the informal sector. In Asia, we know very well how important the informal sector is, and we cannot just put them in the system very quickly, but we still need to see how to associate them, how they can effectively benefit from the incentives in order to move further. And even at the level of this informal sector, there are very interesting innovations that are happening that we don't know, all of us, and we need to see how we can get them known, be embedded in the system in order that they contribute effectively to the transition. The concept of managing plastic, refusing plastic, reusing plastic has been well accepted, but in practice, it is too limited, and each and every one of us is not 100% really fully aligned with those principles, including myself. Countries like Pakistan, Laos, and others are taking the good legislative and policy approach on that, looking for the right incentives, the feasibility of the extended producer responsibility, which is a very challenging one, but it's one of the most important ways to bring in the private sector and providing them later on with the needed technical support, financial support, inducing the voluntary action, so that all this can be properly considered in an action plan that could be implementable, not just a document that put on the shelf. And for that, having a platform to discuss plastic where you bring the different stakeholders will be essential, while considering the specificities of each local context when talk about plastic. We don't have one solution that fits all, and not even with a country. You have to look at different levels. And we heard about what is at national level and what need to be done at the municipal level, where at the end of the day, that's where it is implemented. But they understand the issue differently, they tackle the problem differently. Still, it has to be done all with them. We need to be all aware about alternatives and trade-offs. As I said earlier, not every solution is the perfect one that we provide. We have to properly think about the trade-offs and involve the consumer. When we talk about plastic, and I said it myself in the beginning, most of the time we're going end of the pipe. We have to be very serious about the upstream, downstream context in a system thinking. While we all understand that the disposal culture is still there and probably still there for a couple of decades, if not more. So we need to properly understand and improve the reuse of the plastics by policy, by design, so that we can cycle in the plastics properly in the society system. The economic sense of it has not been well understood enough. The financial instruments that can support that are not well known, if they do exist. So we cannot transition to a society where we can talk about sustainability of plastic management without having properly the extended producer responsibility, the right financial instruments to taking out the harmful plastics that we know are there and we need to get out of them. And even with a strong push from the government as it's happening, which is an essential support, implementation at local level, municipal level, need to be considered more carefully with the right enabling capacity for those municipalities. And as I said earlier, I repeat it, do not neglect the informal sector, without which we cannot solve this issue of plastics. So decoupling plastic from economic growth, a colleague has put it on the chat. Shouldn't we talk about degrowth? I personally would think we should come to it at some point, because growth is getting harmful, but still we can make the things more efficient and consider better this issue of conveniency versus necessity. And the example of the biscuit and the plastic is common now. And you see it a lot, not only in Asia, in European society, where people are consuming individual, and we put all in very individual packages, and effectively we are contributing to complicating the problem rather than anything else. So finally, we seriously need to consider more carefully our consumption patterns and behavior while addressing the plastic issues, connecting with the large industries and the small and medium enterprises, which are the target of this EU Switch Asia program, through an waste management system, while engaging throughout the value chain, greening properly the value chain. With this, I want to thank you all. I'm sorry I could not cover everything, just some hints. We will be preparing a report very soon that will be shared with you, a summary. The video will be available very, very soon. Make the best out of it. And thank you all. And as I said earlier, we are not concluding our discussion on plastic with this meeting. There will be others that will follow, larger conferences. And the main purpose is to have multi-stakeholder collaboration. We have various stakeholders here with us. Let us keep in touch. Let us build on our respective experience. Let us keep on sharing good practices and trying to see, at least from our side, how Switch Asia and the EU can take up those new ideas to embed them in the new programming cycle so that we can get the right funding and support for that. With this, thank you all. Cosima, last word to you.
Thank you very much, Arab, for excellently summing up all of the different threads that that our contributors have launched. And yeah, I would also like to thank you in preparation for this event with the wide network. And yeah, I'm looking forward to going on with the exchange on this important topic.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good day, good evening, good night, and let us remain connected. Thanks a lot.